Imagine a moment you know better than you think. Someone you love is hurting, and you are there. You listen. You give your time, your energy, your attention. You solve their problems. You sacrifice sleep, your plans, even your own needs, just to make sure they are okay. And in that moment, some part of you feels strangely right about it, like this is the reason you exist. But then they do not change. They keep making the same bad choices as before. They go back to the person who hurt them. They refuse help in the exact way you believed was correct. And you feel something collapse inside you, not because they failed, but because you are the one who feels betrayed. That is the strangest moment of all. You were not the one who got hurt in this story, but you ache like you are the victim. Why? Maybe you have asked yourself that question at 2 in the morning, lying there staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why helping people leaves you this exhausted. You are not a bad person. In fact, you are a very good person. Sometimes so good that almost no one in your life truly understands what that is costing you. And it is that very goodness, that instinct to rescue, to fix, to be the one still standing when everyone else has walked away. That is the problem, not because it is wrong, but because it is hiding something far deeper that you have not yet had the courage to look at directly. This video is not here to tell you that you need to care less. It is not here to turn you cold or indifferent. The biggest insight is coming at the end, and when it arrives, I think you will understand why. For all this time, your goodness has been the very thing holding you in place, not setting you free. White Knight Syndrome. The name sounds almost romantic, even noble. The knight in shining armor riding in to save someone in distress, an image woven into countless stories across thousands of years. But modern psychology looks at that image and sees something entirely different. Mary Lumia and Marilyn Krieger, in their research on this pattern, described White Knight Syndrome not as pure altruism, but as a complex behavioral model. One where the rescuer is not truly saving the other person, but saving themselves through the other person. That distinction sounds small. It changes everything. Think about this carefully. When you help someone, the simplest question you can ask is whether you are doing it for them, or whether you are doing it because you need to do it. Two completely different answers, even though the outward action looks identical. And the frightening part is that even you do not always know the true answer. Buddhist philosophy has a concept called idiot compassion, meaning not genuine compassion, but emotional self-gratification disguised as kindness. When you keep giving money to a friend who is struggling with alcoholism, you are not helping them. You are helping yourself escape the discomfort of watching them suffer. The psychological mechanism is the same across many different fields. We act on whatever makes us feel better, then tell ourselves a different story to explain why we did it. The White Knight is not a bad person. This is the most important thing to understand from the start. People carrying this pattern are often deeply empathetic, sensitive, with emotional depth that most people around them simply do not possess. They genuinely feel the pain of others. The problem is not in their heart. The problem is that this sensitive heart learned, very early in life, that love means rescuing, and that personal worth is tied to being needed. Do you remember the first time you felt truly important? Not because you existed, but because you did something for someone. That moment may have happened when you were very young, and it left a mark far deeper than you realize. Carl Jung described the concept of the shadow, the dark side of personality that we do not recognize in ourselves, the motives, the fears, the wounds hiding beneath actions we believe are purely good. And White Knight Syndrome is one of the most subtle expressions of that shadow, precisely because it conceals itself behind something society does not just accept, but actively praises: kindness, That is exactly what makes it harder to recognize than almost anything else. And that is why we need to go deeper. To understand why white knight syndrome forms, you need to understand what happens to a child who grows up in an environment where love is unstable. Not necessarily abuse, not necessarily obvious deprivation. Sometimes it is simply a parent whose emotions are unpredictable, someone whose love is conditional, tied to whether the child is being good enough, pleasing enough, compliant enough. That child learns very quickly. I am loved when I am useful. I am safe when I am necessary. And that invisible lesson, absorbed not through words, but through thousands of small moments, becomes embedded so deeply in the structure of who they are that by the time they are 25 or 30 years old, they have no memory of when they first learned it. Being needed becomes the only language of love they know. This is the first micro-insight. Not that they do not know how to love, only that they know a single syntax of love, give in order to be allowed to stay. And then they grow up, enter relationships, and continue doing the only thing they were conditioned to do. They seek out people who need to be saved, not consciously. No one wakes up in the morning thinking that today they will find someone in pain so they can feel valuable. But at the unconscious level, there is a powerful pull toward people who are wounded, chaotic, in crisis, because for the white knight, the chaos of the other person is the stage on which they are finally allowed to be themselves. Bowlby's attachment theory shows us that the bonding patterns formed in early childhood do not just affect how we love, they affect who we choose to love. People with anxious attachment, the type the white knight most commonly carries, tend to be drawn toward those with avoidant attachment, people who are cold, distant, hard to reach. Why? Because that distance activates the most familiar fear they know. I am not enough. I need to try harder. I need to give more, and that loop becomes its own kind of addiction. This is the second micro-insight. The white knight is not drawn toward healthy, stable people, not because they do not want that, but because healthy people do not trigger the emotional survival mechanism that has long since become their identity. A quiet, stable, drama-free relationship feels boring, even suspicious. But someone who is hurting, needing, unraveling, feels like home. And yet there is a layer deeper still that most analyses miss entirely. The white knight does not only rescue others to feel valuable. They rescue others to avoid having to face themselves. When you are absorbed in someone else's problems, you have no time to look at your own. When your focus is locked on their pain, your own pain can be temporarily numbed. Rescuing others is a sophisticated form of dissociation, a way of living outside yourself. Schopenhauer once wrote that most human activity is an effort to escape one's own suffering by submerging into things outside the self. His philosophy is brutal in the way that truth is often brutal. And when you look at the white knight through that lens, you do not see a hero. You see a person who is running. They are just running in a direction society has marked with a sign that reads, "Good person." Now let me ask you something directly. How many times have you told yourself you were helping because you cared, when in reality you were helping because you could not tolerate the feeling of helplessness that came with watching someone hurt? How many times did your caring actually function as a way to control the outcome of a situation because you feared that if something went wrong, you would somehow be responsible? How many times did you keep giving to someone who was not giving back simply because you needed to believe that your sacrifice meant something, that it was not worthless? And most importantly, how many times have you looked at yourself and wondered why, after everything you have done for others, you still feel this empty? That is the most important question. And that emptiness is the clue. When you draw your worth from saving other people, you are building your identity on a foundation that can never be stable. The other person can change at any moment. They can heal, and you lose your role. They can fail to heal, and you carry the failure. They can refuse your help, and you feel rejected in a way that is completely disproportionate to the situation. This is the third micro-insight. The pain the white knight feels when rejected is not the pain of someone turned down emotionally. It is the pain of someone who just lost the only evidence they had that they mattered. And from that point, everything begins to shift. If you have come this far and recognized some part of yourself in what has just been described, the first thing I want to say to you is that none of this is a verdict. Recognizing a pattern does not mean you are broken. It means you are courageous enough to look at the places most people turn away from. And from that recognition, something genuinely different can begin. The first thing that needs to change is not your behavior, but the question you ask yourself before you help. Instead of asking, "What can I do for them?" begin practicing the question, "What am I feeling right now? And where is that feeling coming from?" That question is not designed to make you selfish. It is designed to distinguish between help that comes from strength and help that comes from fear. Think of a surgeon. They can only help a patient when they themselves are steady, clear-headed, undistorted by emotion. A surgeon whose hands are shaking with anxiety over the patient helps no one. Their calm is not indifference. It is the prerequisite for genuine help. You can ask yourself before each act of giving, am I helping from my own fullness or from the emptiness inside me? The second thing, and this is the harder one, is learning to sit with helplessness without needing to act your way out of it. When you see someone in pain and feel a powerful impulse to do something immediately, that impulse is usually not about them. It is about the discomfort you are experiencing as you witness their suffering. Stoicism calls this prohairesis, the capacity to distinguish what belongs to you and what does not. Epictetus, who grew up as a slave and understood helplessness in the most literal possible sense, said that the foundation of freedom is not controlling the world outside you, but releasing the need to control it. Another person's pain is theirs. Their journey of recovery is theirs. You can stand beside someone without needing to become the person who fixes it. Think of a tree beside a river. It does not stop the water from flowing, and it is not swept away by it. It is simply there, presence without control. That is the hardest thing to learn, and also the most valuable. The third thing is rebuilding your sense of self-worth, entirely separate from being needed. This does not happen in a single night, and it does not happen through thinking alone. It requires you to begin paying attention to parts of yourself that have nothing to do with anyone else. Interests you pursue because they genuinely fascinate you, not because someone praised you for them. Values you hold not because they make you useful, but because they are simply who you are. Nietzsche spoke of will to power, not in the sense of dominating others, but in the sense of self-mastery, of becoming yourself. Real strength is not the ability to change other people. It is the ability to exist fully, even when no one needs you. Can you sit alone in a room, no one to help, no one to rescue, and still feel complete? The fourth thing, and I want to include here something that many people resist hearing, is recognizing that sometimes the best help you can offer someone is to not help them. Not because you do not care, but because every time you step in and solve their problems, you are indirectly communicating, "I do not believe you are capable of doing this yourself." And that message, no matter how lovingly it is wrapped, quietly erodes the other person's confidence and self-determination. If you truly care about someone, the most valuable thing you can sometimes offer is to be a witness to their journey without intervening in it. To trust them enough to fail and to learn from that failure. And if this is landing somewhere real in you, and you want to keep exploring this, I want to invite you to leave in the comments what you recognized in yourself while watching this, not for judgment, but because sometimes writing it out is part of the process of understanding it. We have come a long way together. And I want to end not with another piece of advice, but with something that perhaps no one has said to you in quite this way. Everything we have examined, all the mechanisms, the old wounds, the unconscious patterns, none of it diminishes the fact that you are someone who knows how to love. But there is a paradox at the center of white knight syndrome, and when you truly see it, everything changes. The person you have spent your whole life trying to rescue is you. You were not searching for wounded people in order to help them. You were searching for them because in them, you saw the part of yourself you did not know how to hold directly. You saved them because you did not know how to save yourself. And here is the final paradox. The day you no longer need to rescue anyone is the day you become someone who can truly love. Not love born from fear. Not love born from need. But love from freedom, from fullness, from that place inside you that does not waver, even without someone else's confirmation. You do not need to be something for someone. You only need to be yourself. That is enough, and perhaps that is the most courageous act of all.